Three Waters rebrand, bitterness remains despite refresh. I think we've nailed it. Honestly, there's a balance to strike here, Kieran McAnulty. Labour's new PM and new minister this week dumped the contentious Three Waters policy in favour of a rebranded affordable water.
Subscribe our YouTube channel and click our bell icon for new videos.
Favor of a rebranded affordable water. A not so subtle attempt to take the heat off and reclaim the narrative. They drove home the message of cheaper rates, but critics have continued to attack the plan as a new veneer of paint over the same unpopular plan. It's nearly 3 years since Labour first unveiled its Three Waters reforms. Subsequently bogged down in fierce debate over co-governance and asset theft and hampered by a failure to clearly communicate why the reforms were needed, the government this week set out to sell their renewed vision. Local Government Minister Kieran McAnulty, appointed less than 3 months earlier by incoming Prime Minister Chris Hipkins, was tasked with reviewing the plan to take water services management away from councils, and hand it to 4 mega-entities. His solution was a more fragmented and regional approach with 10 entities, and a start date pushed back by 2 years.
Subscribe our YouTube channel and click our bell icon for new videos.
His solution was a more fragmented and regional approach with 10 entities, and a start date pushed back by 2 years to mid-2026. With it came the long-awaited explanation of why change was needed. Here's the guts of it, McAnulty began, in his trademark blokey style. Up to $180 billion local councils need to find, and they can't do it by themselves because councils individually are at their debt cap, or if they're not, their communities can't afford to pay any higher rates. If they try to work together through a CCO, council-controlled organization, like Wellington Water, there's a limit to that because the debt that councils hold on their balance sheet still stays there, and if they try and do shared services, it doesn't allow councils to be able to borrow the money they need to be able to fund this. It would be costlier for ratepayers than the previous 4-entity plan, to the tune of about $2,800 a year, but McAnulty stressed it would still save them between $2,700 and $5,400 a year compared to the status quo. He pitched the change as a middle ground, giving councils more voice while retaining balance sheet separation, the independence from council control and debt which ensures a good credit score and access to cheaper lending. But while the government made a song and dance about the money voters would save, it quietly ditched the majority of the $2.5 million sweetener payments promised to councils. While $500 million to keep councils from suffering financially would go ahead, along with another $500 million already allocated, the remaining $1.5 million would not. These details were not included in the initial announcement or documentation, but buried in the details of documents released after the fact. Questioned later about the move, McAnulty explained $1 million of it would have come from the entities, and with more groupings they would be more constrained, and making changes so late in the piece is going to cost money. More unpalatable aspects of the policy remained untouched, however. This included the 50-50 membership for councils and Mana Wenua on strategic oversight groups, who would appoint the corporate-style boards. National calls it divisive, while ACT's David Seymour called it undemocratic. Labour had called it co-governance for years, but Hipkins was adamant it was not really that, arguing it was merely a way for Mana Wenua to have a say. Maori had warned Hipkins against cutting the policy, and Mana Wenua like Te Runanga Arrangit and Owaira General Manager Corey Hebard were pleased it was retained. Despite the fishhooks, McAnulty was confident the changes would persuade enough councils to claim majority support. As it turned out, at least 18 of the 30 councils in the Communities for Local Democracy group, formed in opposition to the original proposal, were unswayed. 6 said they were still digesting the detail, and 6 did not answer requests for comment, so not exactly a ringing endorsement. Some of the remaining 37 mayors outside that core opposition group were more persuaded, some not, while others were disappointed the changes would mean higher rates than the previous plan. With an election on the horizon, It comes down to a choice for voters between Labour's affordable water plan and National's local water done well. The latter includes repealing the current legislation, enforcing ring-fencing of water rates to be spent on water infrastructure, and encouraging councils to voluntarily form groupings to help keep costs down. The two major parties dispute each other's plans. National says the government's numbers don't add up. Labour says its numbers are based on council data and have been peer-reviewed twice, and National has not presented its own costings. National's Simon Watts rejected McAnulty's criticism their plan amounted to the status quo. The status quo does not have stricter regulation on water quality, it doesn't have stricter regulation around economic regulation, it doesn't have a requirement as a bottom line by law that these entities have to be financially sustainable. 24newsread.blogspot.com Deputy Political Editors Craig McCulloch and Thomas Coughlan assess the differences between the two, with Coughlan saying Nationals boils down to less certainty but more freedom for councils. McCulloch says the two policies are closer than they've ever been, both have the same objective, they simply have different ways of getting there. It's now up to each party to promote and defend their plan, voters will make the final decision. Economic regulation, it doesn't have a requirement as a bottom line by law that these entities have to be financially sustainable. 24newsread.blogspot.com Deputy Political Editors Craig McCulloch and Thomas Coughlan assess the differences between the two, with Coughlan saying Nationals boils down to less certainty but more freedom for councils. McCulloch says the two policies are closer than they've ever been, both have the same objective, they simply have different ways of getting there. It's now up to each party to promote and defend their plan, voters will make the final decision. Promote and defend their plan, voters will make the final decision.
Subscribe our YouTube channel and click our bell icon for new videos.